Hi everyone, and I am so excited for this series of videos I am doing in honor of Victober, and I am doing a video on my 10 favorite Victorian novels. It was very hard to kind of pick 10 because I love different ones for different reasons, but in the end I kind of picked the 10 that I thought if I had to, the order I would reread them. And so I just can't wait to show you all of my favorite books. And I thought I'd start with my favorite. I know that seems kind of random, but I'm just so excited to talk about this one that I couldn't wait any longer. So please do excuse me. I have, some notes to look at just because there's so much I wanted to say about Wives and Daughters. So I will be kind of glancing back and forth, but trying to focus on the camera for the most part. And so my favorite, just the beautiful, wonderful, magnificent Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. This book comes in just a little over 600 pages. It is fairly lengthy, but I think very well worth your time. And this is the story of Molly Gibson. And this starts out with sort of Cinderella fairy tale like elements where Molly Gibson lives with her widowed father, and as she is growing into a young lady, he takes it upon himself to give her a new mother and remarries a woman, Hyacinth Clare. In addition to gaining a new stepmother, she gains a stepsister in the form of Cynthia, Hyacinth's daughter. And, her life and all the dynamics of her life that were before, everything is thrown into chaos when these two family members come into her home. And in addition to that, she's really spending a lot of time with them because her father is a doctor. And this is when doctors did house visits, basically exclusively. They did have patients from time to time come to their houses, but he's out traveling a lot of the time. So that means Molly is going to be spending a lot of time with these ladies. And another family that are a major part of this are the Hamley family, and they live in Hamley Hall nearby. And there is Squire Hamley, the father, and his wife, and his sons Roger and Osborne. And Roger seems to more take after his father in that he's an outdoorsman. Also, he loves botany and biology and science in general. He just loves learning all of that kind of area of expertise. And then his son Osborne, who is more like his mother in that he loves to read, he loves poetry, he loves to write. And so that's definitely an interesting dynamic in that household. So you kind of get to follow these two families through the course of about 3 years in their lives and see the changes that take place, all of the things that happen, and their relationships and how the characters evolve over that time. So this is set during the years 1827 to 1830. It is a novel of yesteryear. So this is before the Victorian era, but this would have been when Elizabeth Gaskell was young. And this is inspired by the place where she grew up and just kind of her childhood and the more rural England, because in Victorian England, things were really becoming more industrial, a lot less rural. So like I said, to Elizabeth Gaskell, a novel of yesteryear. So this definitely is going to feel different than something like Oliver Twist or Nicholas Nickleby. It's definitely set more rural. In addition to that, the train hasn't even really been invented. It's not. There isn't tons of train tracks being built. It's not going to, occur in Molly or Cynthia's lives at all traveling by train. So you can tell it does feel a little bit earlier than Victorian. And I think it's really neat that she wanted this novel, that everything is changing and just becoming different in the Victorian era. So kind of this cozy look back at provincial life. Another thing that is neat about this is she has some novels that are more social commentary. Ruth, Sylvia's Lovers, and Mary Barton, definitely, and North and South are all very heavy on the social commentary. This is more the provincial life, but still concerned, like the other novels that are more social commentary, how these individual lives, how they can kind of play out against the broader social and historical context that is there. So it's really interesting. You're given all these little minute, everyday details. And the subtitle of this is supposed to be, she had it, Wives and Daughters, an Everyday Story. But you're really seeing the ramifications of the decisions that all these characters make on kind of a grand scale, how it's affecting their lives. And so it feels as big to you as, what's happening in Helston in North and South, or what's happening with the mill. These decisions feel as big to you because you come to care for these characters. It's, everyday things rather than exceptional. But what makes it so neat about that, you're getting these everyday details, what kind of dress Molly bought, the different foods that they eat in the house, the different foods that Hyacinth doesn't want them to eat that they were eating, that these characters become so real and flesh and blood to you. At the end, it's just Molly. It just seems like Molly is such a real person to me. And you just get to be in their homes. It's such an intimate portrait, and I really appreciate that, this up close and personal aspect of it. But one thing also that we can't forget is Molly being the central character, she is right on the threshold of marrying age. So that therefore does make her interesting and story-worthy, because we want to see this fate of Molly. What is going to happen to Molly? And it makes the everyday life just seem so significant. And so we become concerned with, like, will they go to this party? What kind of dress will Molly buy? Mr. So-and-so sent a bouquet. Are they going to take that to the ball with them? So really interesting how quickly you become concerned with those details. And it is interesting also to think about, Dr. Gibson is a doctor, and so that gives them a somewhat socially ambiguous position. They don't have title, but being a doctor, being a clergy, you're definitely not, lower class. You're not in trade, which was considered kind of vulgar, and you couldn't socialize with the people of the upper echelon. But people in doctors' families, vicars' families could kind of socialize with lords and ladies. They weren't considered equals. But that's really interesting too, because then it was a possibility that she could marry up or she could marry down. So it's something that makes the novel really interesting, in that you don't know exactly where she's going to end up. And then so ironically, it almost makes she and Cynthia the novel's most interesting characters, because their rank is so fluid. They really can go up or down. And so they really are going to change kind of the flavor of the story by the gentleman that they choose to be with. And then also, like I said before, it does start out somewhat fairy tale-like, but tweaked. So in a more realistic fashion. So, Hyacinth, her stepmother, is not this wicked stepmother who has it in for Molly and is like going to poison her. She is just selfish and thoughtless. And so a lot more like you feel like you can know her in real life, and just a little bit clueless and lacking in empathy. And Cynthia is not this wicked stepsister. She's just a little bit selfish and thoughtless herself. So it definitely feels like a very realistic fairy tale. So I think, like I said, kind of like realistic Cinderella story, which I think is really fun. And then another interesting way to think about Wives and Daughters, in the aspect, I said Roger Hamley, he's really into botany and biology and ecology, all of those things, studying really minute details about nature. A lot of times he's out in the pond near Hamley Hall, and he is looking at he takes water samples in, and he looks through a microscope, at these small details. And so I heard one commentator say that this is almost like a social ecology. So these little details add up to very significant things. These little details about discussions and hat making and what they're playing on the piano and letter writing. All of these things, they really add up. And so, we get to see Molly or Cynthia or Dr. Gibson doing these really everyday things, but then we can learn truths and general patterns about the story. And it's interesting because it also connects an interest with nature and out of door things with kind of the everydayness, the slowness of everyday life. People that are willing to kind of sit back and see all those everyday details and be interested in them and want to know the significance of them. So, you know, little things like the handkerchief you embroidered. So I think it's definitely a novel for if you really want in-depth knowledge of your characters, and I think they are such worthwhile characters. I love the Hamley men, and personally for myself, I think I like Wives and Daughters more than any Austen novel, which that's saying a lot because I love Jane Austen. But to me, the men in Wives and Daughters and most of Elizabeth Gaskell's novels, I love that they're working men and they're passionate about their interests, and they have you know, projects and tasks and just things they want to accomplish. And it's really neat to see them kind of forging ahead and doing those things, as opposed to Mr. Darcy, who's great and all, but he doesn't really do much. Like, he does leisure, and that's about it. So I just really absolutely adore this book. It's, you know, by far my favorite Victorian novel, and I hope that maybe I've convinced a couple people to try this out. I was really thrilled this year. I kept talking it up, and I got Olive over at a book Olive to read it. And so, of course, once you do actually convince someone to read it, then you're nervous. Like, oh, what if they don't like it? What if I kind of wasted their time? But she loved it so much. So it made me very happy that she ended up loving it a lot. So I do think a lot of people, if they're willing to give it a try, willing to put in the time, you know, just read a chapter a day. Take months to read it. There's no need to rush this. I really think you might end up enjoying it, including men out there. Even though this is a pink book, this is not just for women. So yes, my favorite Victorian novel. I look forward to telling you guys about my other favorite Victorian books, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.